those that work with me now know that if they dare say my post did really well, I'm going to be like, right, so how much did you make? Because you can't spend it otherwise.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Aha Moments podcast with me, Kobi Omenaka. Today I'm joined by Richard Moore. Richard Moore is someone I came across on LinkedIn at the end of 2024, last year, and it was a LinkedIn live session which I took a gamble on, and Richard was the guest of honour for that session. I knew nothing about Richard before that session, but was blown away.
People think selling is one thing. It's not. It's an entire spectrum and styles of sell.
Yeah.
You have bro marketing, manipulation, and duping people at one end, and like everyone hates that. That's the ick. But that's the most prevalent because it's the most accessible.
I kept in touch with Richard after that session, and he graciously answered a few of my questions on DM in LinkedIn, and quickly realised that he's someone who I definitely wanted to know more about. So I asked him onto this here podcast. On this, we talk about selling and why it isn't necessarily a sleazy, cringy thing to do.
What do they want? What they want is an easy access to answers. The answer to the question, tell me about yourself, is not crossing their mind. They just don't care yet. You haven't earned that right to tell them.
We go from his background, how he started in sales, through to now. And although he's got quite a substantial LinkedIn following, over 100,000 as this episode goes live, we talk about how that isn't necessarily important to make an impact on LinkedIn, and how a lot of the people he works with smaller followings can also and have been making fantastic inroads into their business, building their businesses with decent revenues, and also having a great lifestyle with it as well.
She's a coach, so solopreneur. She will make $1 million this year. She's like just about to hit 20,000 followers, not a mega influencer, never goes viral.
Yeah.
And she operates at like, for the majority of this, it's been like 20 to 50 likes. What she does is she spends is Pareto efficiency, like 80% of her time is spent with a few individuals each day, going deep, having meaningful conversations.
Richard is the founder of the Art of Sell community, which I joined recently, and is one of the few communities I've stuck with, actually. I think it's really inspiring. I get a lot out of it. Him and his team are always on hand to give you advice. If you're interested in joining the Art of Sell, I'll include a link in the show notes or in the comments below, and please get involved. Enjoy. So Richard, I met you through a LinkedIn Live. It was just an audio event that I participated. I think it's one of the first ones I've done, and I'm getting more and more used to spending time on LinkedIn. I'm having a lot of fun on LinkedIn, actually. From a couple of years ago, thinking it was the standoffish social media platform, but in the past couple of months, I'm really enjoying spending time there, and it feels like I can legitimately spend time there as well and feel like I'm doing work.
As well, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's got good context to it when you're on it.
So can you tell me about what you do and why LinkedIn's important for you? And just give it. Well, first of all, let's learn a bit about yourself before you came to being a LinkedIn consultant and expert.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I'll give the short version. Post university was I in 2003 I got my first job, which was selling internet marketing in the city in London. And so we were one of these startups that was mostly a publishing house in print publications and selling ads in that. And in 1996, they were like, hey, the internet, let's try that too. It's a really progressive company. And I was a massive nerd for the internet in my teens and that, and I loved it, like the whole thing. And so it's so interesting that I kind of grew up with it as a teenager. I was the nerd at school that was spending my lunch times in the IT lab coding and building bits of computer in the 90s rather than getting sunshine. And then so it was so interesting that I had this thing I could go into. So the first 10 years of my career were selling online things. So it was internet portals, like search engine marketing and stuff for industry. So I was cold calling, B2B, and that was what I was doing. And then we moved to things like digital publications, and then actual conferences in the mid-late 2000s. And so on. Then I worked in real life conferences, and then I was headhunted into a recruitment house. So I moved through the ranks, team leader, head of sales, sales director, ultimately. And 2014, so now 10 years ago, I pivoted out. I was like, this is enough. I'm just going to build my own thing. And so that was Facebook. And so I found it really interesting because you got to remember, my job was cold calling, or at least running teams of people cold calling, a thing you probably could live without, unsolicited. And like people are like, oh, come on, man, I don't want to buy this. And so the art is getting someone to feel, do you know what? I not only do I trust you, but I'm going to give you $8,000 after half an hour on a phone call. We don't even look them in the eyes. So that was really interesting to learn, but it was hard. Then I went to Facebook and I was like, what can I do? I can help people sell. And I just found 2014 was really interesting because there was so much of the online sales coachy kind of thing starting out, and early bro marketing. This is like the cusp of Russ Bronson and that kind of stuff. And it was so interesting because that's when I realized that people were posting lots.
Yeah.
And they had a great talent and really good ideas, but they were just broke. And I was like, they didn't get any money. They don't know what they're doing. And they were trying the content and hoping that would work out thing. And I'm like, sure. But like when I got into contact with them, firstly, they were just like happy to speak to me. That's profound. I was like, this is weird. It's like so easy. And of course, I wasn't going through gatekeepers to try and get to the managing director. I was just speaking to a solopreneur.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I was like, this is insane how easy. And I use easy carefully, but it really was easy by comparison. And so I started doing consulting in the city and also coaching online with people, just by selling them hours of my time. But then I added, Instagram, but then I got to like 2017, back in 2017, and I hadn't really been on LinkedIn at all, but I looked and I was like, I remember saying something's going on over there. And I remember calling it. I did a post on Facebook and I was like, something's going on over there, like something we should be watching. And it was because at the end of the summer in 2017, they flipped the switch on video. So video then became like, this is
feasible.
It was, yeah, exactly. It was like a status update or white paper is all you could do really. And that was funny because that's documents, which is our sliders, carousels now.
Yep.
Originally, it was meant to be a white paper. And it is, but it's like no one's doing white paper because no one looks at them. So it's so interesting that then January 2018, so almost 7 years, I was like, why wouldn't I do content there? Because contextually, makes far more sense rather than competing with like what I call pure social on places like Facebook. So I did, and like it wasn't a full pivot. I was like, I'll keep Facebook chugging along in the same way as going from cold calling to that warmer interaction, nurture-based sell on Facebook was this step change. It was the same. It was like, the way I describe it is like a rocket suddenly.
Right.
Like LinkedIn, everyone was like, yeah, I'm here to talk about this kind of thing. I was like, I couldn't be more aligned right now. And so like it really took off. And I was just focused on selling coaching. And every deal I was just like, I'll ask for more. I'll ask for more. I'll ask for more. And then when the pandemic hit, what was fascinating about that is it just showed, and this is a tactical thing people need to be aware of, despite the engagement rates of posts, we should really be aware that it's interesting to think about the people who are actually looking at us.
Right.
And it's suddenly all these people were coming out of the woodwork going, this stuff you're talking about, we're not allowed out now, but we still have a job and targets. And like suddenly it was like, rather than like, oh, whatever, LinkedIn, as if we'll do the phone or like we'll meet in person. Suddenly I became incredibly relevant. So it's very fortuitous, perversely, that we had this pandemic. So that helped a lot. And then towards the end of 2020, well, it was actually late summer 2020, I released a flagship offering, which was my first scalable option. So rather than just selling my time, I was now like, right, here's my community called the LinkedIn Client Accelerator. And it was like, people join, I do training, and we go from there. So it's just so nice because my focus has always been on selling. And it's like how to convert, like the nuance and elegance of conversion without being annoying is the key part, and but like by drawing in, like getting people into orbit with you around your content, sure, but like even with a trickle of engagement, what do you say to the individual to not scare them off? And like, what are the words? And just, if you do anything for 21 years, you tend to be half decent at it. And that seems to map to people getting great results. So I'm really loving that. And I what's interesting now is that, I mean, I killed Facebook in probably 2018, I think, but like, and it's just LinkedIn and email. But I think now what's interesting is that I feel that whilst LinkedIn is my device, I'm really conscious that pigeonholing myself as a LinkedIn trainer is really not like what I want. And so this year has been very much a gentle transition away from that to kind of lean more
You
in.
set up a
Yeah.
community, haven't you?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've now got the Art of Sell,
Yeah.
and that is now sitting alongside the Accelerator as my other flagship offering. You've got two of them, and but the idea is into next year. I've already started doing it with some of the brand work with my team and so on, but it's very much going to be focused on education in selling and conversion, because the fact is, like, a lot of the fundamentals I'm teaching are applicable in person or on Instagram, for instance, and so you just got to be careful. Imagine being this, but for Facebook. Look where Facebook is now, for
Mm.
instance. Things have changed there. And you can't hedge that LinkedIn will always be around, but you can hedge that humans will need to communicate with each other. So I think I'm enjoying this golden period, and we really are still early in many ways with LinkedIn, but I am massively making sure that I have something that will last a bit longer. And actually, my true space is selling anyway, as opposed to social media and or LinkedIn.
There's so many things you said there which I want to touch upon.
Yes,
One
sorry, quite
being,
a long intro.
no, that's great. That's the so I'm a marketer by second background. My first degree and first part of my career was in engineering, but then I pivoted
Mm,
to marketing for a variety of reasons, and I love it. But then often I hear the term sell, and I
yeah.
traditionally work along with the sales team. I bring leads, hand them off to the sales team, and the
Mm,
term sell like instills fear in my very like core. And when you said about the you're selling them things which they didn't really need or didn't think they needed until they heard the phone ring, then half an hour
absolutely.
later. Because that's what's in my head when I think, oh, I need to sell, I need to get more clients,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and it's not necessarily the case. And when I've done
No.
my best selling, I haven't even thought about selling. I've sent an email saying, oh, okay, I think this will be interesting for you. What do you reckon? And then they're like, yeah, I like it. Let's move. Let's do it.
And that's all that is. You imagine, like, like the these electro. I know if I'm getting really geeky. The electromagnetic spectrum. Like, we
Yeah.
have the visible light and all the different colors,
Then you
and
have
then either
UV and
end you've got like
ultraviolet.
X-ray.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have this whole spectrum. People think selling is one thing. It's not. It's an entire spectrum and styles of sell.
Yeah.
You have bro marketing, manipulation, and duping people at one end, and like everyone hates that. That's the ick. But that's the most prevalent because it's the most accessible. If I'm desperate, underskilled, but willing to go through hell
Yeah.
and give up my time, again, because I'm desperate, I will get a sales job. My interview in 2003 was really only slightly more than, do you have a pulse? And I even remember them saying, or even asking, do you like money? I was like, I've been a student. I've got a £10,000 loan that I had to pay off for my masters. So yeah, kind of do. And it's just like, it was really like, can you read English at down the phone and like just follow the script kind of thing. But the problem is, it's so prevalent, and that low barrier entry means you get the dilution
Yeah.
of quality with crap. And so, of course, that's what people think. In the same way as many at the moment will think that LinkedIn content is this horrible, gross virtue signaling nonsense. It's like, well, no, that's the echo chamber you've put yourself in. If you curate your content, you'll see good stuff. And I just think it's so interesting that when we realize that, here's a good way of putting it. When we say to ourselves, we hate sales, we're saying we hate a particular type of sales.
Yes.
And I often say to people, I bet when someone looks at your content for 3 months, then comes to you and says, hey, I love what you've been talking about. Do you think you might be able to help me with something? I bet you bloody love sales now.
Absolutely.
And so we love it when someone wants to buy something. And that's no different to, in the sense, we can't say it's not selling. It's great marketing. That means the selling goes a little better. But I just think that is crucial. And if you change the style of sell to suit you, then you
Yes.
can be golden. But that's a big mental hurdle, isn't it?
And I think this is what's hooked me in with LinkedIn recently, because like you say, there was the status update and you can upload a white paper or
Yeah,
presentation with
come
was
a
it
long way
Slido,
now.
was it? But now I've been making content since I was like 17. I used to have the mini DV cameras which had to transfer onto a hard
Yeah,
drive
I
before editing
remember.
them.
Oh, that's cool.
And so now when video is like a thing, and I make podcasts regularly, and people saying, well, just, do what you do elsewhere on LinkedIn. I was like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. That suits
Yeah.
me right to the ground. And I feel like not spending time on Instagram doing it, I can do it here and have a bit of a purpose, and then also show what I can do. And then when people do reach out and say, hey, can you help me with the podcast? Can you help me with something else? I'm like,
Mm.
vindication. this is
Yeah.
this
I
is it.
think what's interesting is that there's this weird belief for people who are on the outside, because the average person doesn't do anything on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and it's like, really,
It's
isn't
like
it just,
98% of people don't post on
yeah,
LinkedIn.
precisely. So like the thing you do on, say, Instagram or Facebook is post stuff. Like, that's what you do, and
Yeah.
you interact and you like and you comment. The thing you do on LinkedIn is nothing. And like, so
Unless
the
you want a
average,
job.
yeah, exactly. So and because of that, like, the average person, not in the content creator bubble, but the average person still thinks massively that LinkedIn is for recruitment and for, perhaps, like, is like a digital Rolodex.
Yeah.
So they're still like, really, the link, like, what, like social media. And so because of that, the average person, when they are like trying to get something going online, they ask questions like, well, how is LinkedIn different then? And what I love is that whilst the UX is different, perhaps to a degree, and the way in which we can deliver post and algorithms slightly different. What isn't different is that it's still humans.
Yes.
And the way I like to put it is that, before they are their job title, they are still a human. And so the same behavioral characteristics are in play as anywhere else. And people are like, oh, so what's the strategy? What are you doing? It's like, same as anywhere else. You see someone interact, so engage with them because they're a human. And so a lot of it is very similar to elsewhere. But what's interesting is when you start suggesting to people that they audit if they're actually getting anything from the other platforms, and daring to, for instance, flick the switch off on, say, Instagram because it's never got you anything,
Yeah.
and actually contextually is more aligned to be on LinkedIn, is scary for people. But like, as the saying goes, you've got to be willing to kill your babies. So like, if something's not working, so change it or bin it. Like, otherwise it's just using up bandwidth. But I'm really loving what's possible there, because it's just a little bit more aligned. People are there to speak business, and it's a little bit more professional.
It's the
And of course,
context.
there's trolling.
The context there is completely different. Even though the same, you
Yeah,
can put the same content there. The context is like, okay, in
big
my
one.
headspace, LinkedIn headspace on that tab is like, I'm into it, into
Yeah.
potentially working with other people, solving business problems. But then I go to the Facebook tab and then want to see what, my best friends had for dinner last night. And
Yeah, it's like killing time and dopamine. But I think what's so interesting is there is an overlap, because the entry point, like that access point for LinkedIn
Mhm.
content, has to be an awareness that people are looking in the news feed, usually to distract themselves or to have a break. And so, sure, you can give information and you can be educational, but it does need to be done in a way that's not too dry. Otherwise, it's like, well, I have to do that with my thumb, and I get to go to the next post, which is a bit more interesting. So there's now becoming this interesting meshing of like what grabs attention and what is useful for the business. But, and I must raise this, here's where there's a blind spot,
right.
and I've called it loads. I'm right, by the way. What's interesting is that we can get so fixated when it comes to content on gaining attention, because that is the currency on YouTube and Instagram, for instance.
Hmm.
And it kind of is the currency on LinkedIn, but it's not. It's the entry point for discussion and interaction, because client acquisition is what we're after. If I run a YouTube channel, all I need is views and retention. If I
That's if you're
run a blog,
monetizing via advertising.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And of course, there's other ways I can monetize. And of course, I could do baked in ads and so on. But the truth is, like, that is generally the game. Same with podcasts.
Yeah.
If I know someone who runs an amazing podcast, and she's like, I just need downloads. As long as I get downloads, I'm all good. And I appreciate that's a form of conversion. But if I want conversation starters, interactions with someone one on one, I have to be aware that my TikTok video that is going viral over on TikTok, because it's just great for attention. It's like addictive to watch. It's me moving some slime around because people love that kind of thing. It's big. But if I put it on LinkedIn, I will get great results in the form of impressions and people going, great, I can switch off for 15 seconds and engage this. But it's not mapping to necessarily an outcome that I'm actually here for. And so I think there needs to be that consideration, because it's becoming fully the mainstream narrative that what we're trying to do is get as many people as possible look at our post, but it's becoming the game as opposed to the entry point to the whole game.
Yeah.
Because the whole game is, and now you interact with them and one-on-one, and you kind of funnel down to, and now we get on a call and now we talk about business. And that's the point. We're not here just for views, because there's no remuneration on that unless you're paid, as I was, for instance, earlier this year. Microsoft was like, review Surface Pro, please, do some posts. We will give you money for doing posts. So then that's an
sure.
exception.
Yeah.
But otherwise, that's not what keeps the lights on.
So with the when we spoke the first time, actually, was on that LinkedIn Live.
Yeah.
And for reasons, I was the only person that managed to get the LinkedIn, like the microphone working.
I remember. No one had their microphone on unmute.
Yeah.
It's quite funny.
First thing is, what I asked you was, and this is something I still struggle with. I'm sure that's a lot of the things that your clients, regular clients, struggle with, is like, how do you present yourself on LinkedIn to make sure that the content you're making is relevant to your ICP? And my particular conflict is like, I love making podcasts. I wish I could make podcasts all day, every day and sell it on to people. But also my bread and butter is digital marketing, particularly in the B2B space.
Yeah.
Can I have my cake and eat it? And if so, how does that work? Or do I need to maybe not kill a darling, but focus on one side and then maybe just bring in the other ones and there's conversations which go further down. And when you're talking about, okay, have that conversation later on, that might be where, okay, bring in the podcast bit, because that could be useful for their content marketing strategy and can be a winner for them.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is that there's an adjacent cell of podcasts. If you make your point, you're showing awareness and you're giving us a lesson as our thought leader that we've chosen to follow.
Yeah.
Through the medium of a podcast clip you recorded. So it's simply the device that it's like you give a clip and then you write a commentary on the lesson within that clip. In my podcast this week, we talked about this, and this is why it's important, because it's showing my awareness of the symptom of the problem that you, dear audience viewer, is experiencing right now. It represents this frustration you've got with digital content marketing or with digital marketing. And it makes that person feel seen and say to themselves, you're dead right, Kobi. That's exactly how I feel. Perhaps you have some enlightened view on what appears to be a blind spot for me, because I don't even know what this frustration I'm experiencing now represents. And this is what's crucial, is they're not typically problem aware. They're typically symptom aware, because they're living that symptom right now. They're feeling frustrated. They've got an inner dialogue of like, man, it's annoying that no one seems to want to buy my stuff. I've got a great product. I'm doing the social content media, like social media thing. Why is no one stepping forward? What am I missing? Total blind spot. That's the problem. But they don't know the problem is you're not doing a call to action, or they don't know the problem is you don't look premium enough they're doing a crap looking video with no good editing, for instance. It could be a multitude of things. They're certainly not solution aware. The vast majority of people are in this, I don't know how to label my problem, but I'm aware of how I feel each day. So you need to meet them there with the clip. And that clip happens to be from your podcast. So, of course, by virtue of them feeling seen and now possibly certainly following you more, seeing more content, engaging with you, possibly getting to the DMs and beyond, they're also like, I'm going to follow this podcast. That's cool. Or can I learn a bit more about being on your podcast? Or like, wow, we need a podcast, separate issue. Maybe you could do that. So that's how it's done. It's like the invisible cell, as it's known, of podcasts and all of that world, because that's your medium for it. So that's really handy, because that's how you would do it, rather than on Mondays we talk about marketing, and on Tuesdays, hey, I do a podcast service. It just gets confusing otherwise, because it depends what day I meet you then. And
that's exactly what I'm going through in the moment. What's it like for your clients when they're wrestling with, that first line in the bio, or the banner image that they have, or their profile picture?
Yeah.
Is that a big challenge that a lot of your people
It
face?
is, because there's a lot of overthinking, and
Mm,
if you ask 5 people, you get 10 answers, it's really difficult. And I think what you gotta remember is it's not what you think. It's about considering where not just where your audience is, but like, the best way to do it is to say to yourself, "What's the state that my audience is in when they receive me?"
right.
And the answer to that is they're not in a hot buying zone, in love with you as their expert. What they are is someone who's perusing, possibly familiar with you, but is being hooked in by something that caught their eye, created some intrigue against a frustration or a problem that resonates with them. And so when you have them there, it's like, right, the logical flow is they're scrolling, they see something that catches their eye, and they read, engage with it. The natural human reaction when curious about someone is to click on the profile link, because that's the natural step. So
Mm,
now they're landing on the page, and you got to remember, like, just think about that experience is it's like, what do they want? What they want is an easy access to answers. The answer to the question, tell me about yourself, is not crossing their mind. They just don't care yet. You haven't earned that right to tell them. What we have done is got someone interested. So job one, to answer your question, on the profile should be to be thinking, what bit are they going to look for first? Well, it's the low hanging fruit, the bit that's not cerebral, which is the profile image.
yep.
And then it's like the title, and like they're looking for words to back up what they're feeling. So the human animal, this is behavioral stuff, but the
Yeah.
human animal will make a judgment, whether that's good or bad, based on their experiences, their background, their worldview, make a judgment on you based on your headshot in no seconds. They'll just make a judgment. They might then reform it within a half second, because they add a narrative and so on, but that's where they look first. So people say things like, well, you shouldn't have sunglasses on, you shouldn't wear a hat, you need to be a nice, warm, welcoming smile, you need to be like fun or whatever. And it's like, yeah, for a certain ICP.
Hmm.
If I need a bad example, just for the sake of it, if I need like a barrister, I wouldn't go on LinkedIn for it, but if I need a barrister, I don't want someone who's happy-go-lucky and jokey. I
Yeah,
want someone
in a
who's
hammock
massively
somewhere.
serious about the law.
Yeah.
And I need the guy to have the pro headshot. You know what I mean? It's like, better be wearing his gown,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And then, so we just got to remember the vibe of the ideal people we work with. And then it's like, we're the same with the banner. Like, well, are you sharing the problem you solve for them? Because what they need straight away is an answer to that question, like, is this worth me sticking around for? You've resonated with them in terms of saying, I see you with the content. When they
Hmm.
click on it, you want to reinforce that clicking on the profile was a good idea.
Yeah.
You do that in the banner by going, I help people with this thing. If there's any lack of clarity, saying things like, I'm a firm believer in the soul of the universe coming together and giving us life. And it's like, that's beautiful, but it's also like really not helpful as your title. And if you like stack everything in, I'm a podcast creator and I'm a speaker and I'm a dad and it's like, great, but like I'm now like I'm in a selfish mode if I'm an audience member clicking on there. That's lovely, but then so is everyone else, and everyone needs to recognize the importance to not self-indulge.
Sure.
Instead, you earn the right to do that by saying, hey, I see you, you're the person who has this kind of problem. So you reinforce it on the banner, you reinforce it in the title, and you reinforce it in the bio. So for instance, just to kind of bring it together, you in the bio, you remind them, you've got this feeling that represents this problem, that's what I help with. Pick one, do the thing that's most obvious that you like, or that's your main offering, and all the other stuff is that comes later. Then when you've got them, that kind of hook on your bio, for instance, earns you the right to say, here's some social proof, or like, here's my credentials, here's my authority, I've worked with these companies doing it, I've got this kind of experience. And then after that, if they're still reading, which are the ones you want, you'll be like, here's something about me, I'm this kind of person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you've got to meet them where they are. And the mistake often, having a crap service, because you probably have a great service, but no one's interested in you yet. And that's what it's just all this comes down to. The same as with DMs. You should just make sure you're aware you've not earned the right to ask them about their business. You need to show that you're on their level to start with, which is when people ask things like, what are your challenges, straight away, it's like, it's none of your business. That's the answer. Until we get to a point where emotionally I'm bought, I like you now and I want to talk to you about stuff. So it's the same for everyone. We often approach things from our perspective rather than how the buyers would want to receive us. And if anyone spends 20 minutes just in the quiet, considering that process, because you go through it yourself as well,
Yeah.
it does give us a lot of the answers on like, well, what would the vibe need to be? What does my ideal person probably need to know? It's what the hell do you do? That directly helps me with the problem you're talking about. And if I may, when you map back out in the opposite direction, all the way back out again to content, when you've done this exercise, you're like, why was I posting about how great it was to be in London today at a conference? I was just doing it for attention. Like, it doesn't map to that person going, oh wow, that guy's my expert, and like, and he's so, I feel seen right now. And it's just so interesting when you do this exercise. It's like, now it affects my content. Now I know that I need to keep meeting them at this state of like, I see you, I know you've got this frustration, it feels like this, doesn't it? Here's a solution, or here's something that you could try. And that's alignment. I think we can all do it. It's just that we've got to stop mucking around doing things that map to indiscriminate attention.
I think
It's
that
got to be the right things for the right people.
I think that dopamine hit that you get though with a
Mm.
like or something potentially going viral, it's hard to deny.
It
And
is.
if it happens, then you want that again. And that's the other, what did you call them? Playful social media platforms. I can't remember what the term you used.
I don't remember.
But I like to. But those other social media platforms are really all just set for you to
Pure social
pure,
kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
And I'm experiencing and hearing from people saying, "Oh, my impressions weren't as high as they were like 3 weeks ago or a month ago." But then also, I don't think they're doing the metric analysis to say, are my conversions changing? Am I actually getting the same?
Yeah.
Is LinkedIn actually serving the right content to the right people, even though it's not as many people? And that's hard to reconcile.
Well, it concerns, you've got to remember, like, my background isn't marketing. My background is sales director,
Hmm.
and so it's the numbers and it's what maps to results. I'm not completely devoid of interest in community and marketing and brand. That stuff lubricates the whole thing, and that's so important. But what's insane is there's this view of it as like, well, the post did really well, and what people often almost always mean by that is, relatively speaking, this post today has a higher volume of impressions than yesterday's post.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm deeming it good.
Yeah.
Or comparatively to what I see in my peer group, it's doing well. Or worse, which is terribly poisonous for them, it's my posts aren't performing because the big influencers get this amount, and so I need to be there.
Yeah.
And like, those that work with me now know that that if they dare say my post did really well, I'm going to be like, right, so how much did you make? Because you can't spend it otherwise. And so did really well. I mean, such a great example is someone I've worked with for about 3.5 years. She is a mum of 3, so she's busy. She lives in London. She's a coach, so solopreneur. She will make 1 million this year. She's like just about to hit 20,000 followers, not a mega influencer, never goes viral.
Yeah.
And she operates at, like, for the majority of this, it's been like 20 to 50 likes. And what she does is she spends it's Pareto efficiency. Like 80% of her time is spent with a few individuals each day, going deep, having meaningful conversations, and showing them that she gets them and can fix the issues. And then as a result of being epic, she charges high ticket. I love that because it's being effective rather than and being efficient at the same time, as opposed to, it's kind of the way I've always looked at it. And this is the way I was told to sell to begin with, because I had a lack of ability at the start. The solution was volume. I had to do $100 a day, which would map to 1 sale a week. And we're constantly being told by people who are lacking competency at the art of this, of business and deal making and client acquisition, constantly being told volume is king. Because if you buy enough lottery tickets, you win something.
Yeah.
But that's not, when people say things like, I've spent 10 hours today on LinkedIn, it's like, what are you even doing? Like we should be, let's be a bit more effective with our time. But like people don't want to hear that because it's a healthy way to legitimize procrastination. What it is, I call it
That's
positive
it.
procrastination. If I'm touching LinkedIn all day, well, it's business,
Yeah.
so it's busy. But I don't want to be too ranty. But that's my
That's
monologue on
that's
it.
maybe that's maybe the whole I'm maybe looking into, thinking, should I just spend 23 hours a day on LinkedIn or no? Pull back.
Exactly, and like it's like if you spend all that time, some people make it a real art form, being very busy, not getting much done. And
Yeah.
I think if you're like, I've met people, man, who are like 12 hours a day mucking around online, and it's like they've got two customers and they're paying them nothing. It's like you're gonna have to go get a job eventually, or they're just getting by. And the person I mentioned who will hit, she's like this close to 1 million. So I think if she's not done it now, she's about to be there. She doesn't work Fridays. She's like,
Brilliant.
Friday's my time. And like
Yeah.
she works like good hours. She's there for her children. She's not deeming success as vanity or even money. She's also being a great mom and wife and all that kind of thing. I'm like, she's just focused. And I think when you focus on building competency, you no longer need volume. And I will say it's consistent that every time someone starts making good money, impressions don't matter that much.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how like this deep comp just doesn't matter because they're getting the thing they're really here for. Everyone, with the exception of very few, everyone is here for client acquisition ultimately. So unless you're getting that, like, and you have to be stoic and you have to put in the effort and you have to recognize patience is a virtue and it's important, but like get in there and speak to people, and like that's so crucial. Otherwise it's a very shallow growth curve over a long time and no money, and people get quite miserable, don't they?
They do. And I should say this podcast is called Aha Moments. We haven't got to them yet. I think I've been absorbing a lot of your information because a lot of this super rings true to me. So thank you for your time and thank you for
Of course.
your consideration, your thoughts. I will be making changes to my LinkedIn profile. I've been procrastinating about doing it. I need to actually get on and do it.
Oh well, I'm really pleased that's helped then. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Before we go into the questions, the aha
Yes.
moment questions, today is the day after you have. I mean, we're talking about potential vanity metrics, but you've crossed 100,000 followers on LinkedIn line, which is still quite nice to feeling, surely.
Yeah. So, well, I did a post yesterday saying I'm about to. I'm at like
Yeah.
99,000 something. But yeah, it will happen this month. And I've been at it a long time. And the thing is, what I can't do is I don't talk about followers, and I don't care about followers because
Yeah.
people. It's interesting because people meet me now and they're like, well, it's easy for you to say all this stuff because you got all these followers. When I had no followers, I was still converting
Yeah.
because I was focused on the individual, and that's all you need. You need one person to interact with. And I just think if I was to say like, oh, it doesn't matter at all, that would be diminishing how lovely it is that people have found some measure of value in what I'm doing. So I do appreciate the follows, but there's nothing wrong with growth hackers who want to build their followers, and like if as long as they are happy and satisfied and doing good, well then I'm happy for them. But my thing is I'm helping the people who are a bit frustrated with that being deemed the answer to getting what they actually want, which is client acquisition. My thing is, well, why don't we focus on the art of client acquisition without it feeling unfulfilled, which is what we talked about at the top of this session, is like
Absolutely.
in a way that feels good for both sides. So I'm thrilled that I hear, in the same way when I got in January this year, I was awarded the blue top voice badge by LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me because I've been here for so long and I've seen it since 2018. And like, I deserve that, man. In my opinion, I'm like, I've worked really hard. I've been a good boy, never been banned or anything. I've been wholesome. I've played
Yeah.
the right game. I've been a model LinkedIn user, but I really feel like I've done my best to give value and be as original as possible. So it's really lovely to get it, but it's not changed me. It's not like, oh, well, suddenly I'm making 1 billion because I'm a top voice or like because of all these followers. It's a nice little extra, and none of these things on their own make a difference, but added together they kind of contribute. So it's nice, but as I wrote in the post yesterday, like, let's get on with our work now.
So to the aha questions,
Yes.
the first one being, What aha moments have you had, maybe for yourself or your clients, though, where you get that light bulb moment and think, actually, this, I mean, we've probably talked about some of them on route here in terms of like maybe the profile or what, you know, it's client acquisition, it's not numbers, but what's the
Yeah.
aha moment that you kind of cling to and also guide people towards when you work with them?
I love this question. It's not really been asked properly. And I've done a lot of podcast interviews, but it's not really been asked in this way. So, and it's made me think like, it's in 2018, I had big surgery on my stomach to remove a lump. It was thought it would be cancer. I was so lucky it turned out to be benign. And it was like a long period, like a year of tests and things. And even going under the knife, it was like, we don't know what it is. We'll find out when we get in there, kind of thing. It was horrible. And then recovery and all that kind of thing. And what was so interesting is that I've been this real student of sales, but specifically the behavioral interactions and the psychology and like the state of people and buyer behavior really is interesting to me. And so I remember in the tests that led up to the having the operation, I had to interact, as you can imagine, with a lot of different consultants and
Yeah.
doctors and so on. And that's where I came up with this idea of the doctor method. Now, the doctor method is that culturally, I'll be really quick. The culturally, we view doctors as, with some exceptions, some people are a bit like no because doctors. But anyway, in the main, we view doctors as the authority in medicine, and culturally that's the case. So our natural inclination is to go see a doctor if there's something up with our body. We just are natural to that. When we get there, because of that positioning, truly, and in our head, we have this narrative of they're here to help us. I've come to them. You'll see the parallel in a sec. And so when they ask us questions, answer them. We comply. So when I walked in off my own accord into the doctor's surgery, and they said, "What's the issue then?" Or "Can you describe that?" And "What about this?" And sit on the table, and like roll your top up or like stick your tongue out and say, "Ah." I never said, "Why the hell should I? Don't pressure me." I said, like, "Sure, no problem." Complete compliance. And then after that, because of the positioning and because of how I was like bought into them, that doctor prescribed a course of treatment. No doctor's like, "Well, look, I mean, we could do this or we could do that." And I don't really know. I mean, which one do you feel, would you feel like any of those could help? Which one do you think would be best? So if you bottle this, you have 3 core stages.
Yeah.
You have authority, compliance, prescription. There's authority in the cultural view of a doctor being the person I should go to, for my expert. You have compliance in the form of they will just ask and I will answer and I will do as I'm told because I see them as my leader. Then your prescription, they are positioned as my expert. Therefore, why I'm not the expert, how can I possibly know what to do? I don't get to choose my solution. I mean, they'll give me options. So in that moment, I'm an expert on what kind of outcome I'd like. But essentially, I don't know what to do. They tell me what's best. Take these tablets for 3 weeks, twice a day. Okay. I don't even question it. Now, when you transpose that into social selling, what you have, instead of authority, compliance, prescription, you have content, DMs, on a call. Authority is built through content. We warm these people up, and I'm not going to use the word grooming, but you nurture them to see you as no longer first an expert, but then that you become their expert. They kind of fall in love with you as their person. There's 1,000,001 people doing podcast offerings, but for whatever reason, it's like, I just dig Kobi. He's into cycling. He loves Star Wars, whatever. Like, so now we're a bit more aligned. You and I before this talked about Manchester. I've got family up there, and we just connected a bit more than on practical levels. Once that's happening, we then can speak to people in the DMs, and they want to interact with us. It's a welcoming energy because they look up to us. With the right positioning, I now get compliance in the DMs, and now I can move to a point where I can ask something like, I wouldn't, but something like, what's the challenge at the moment in your business? And they will want to tell me because I'm their hero who can answer this, and they see me as such. And then when I do the onboarding call, this is hilarious in sales when people go, so look, we could do this, or we can do this. Like, what do you think is best? Who's meant to be the expert?
Yeah. I
So
mean, I do that
never give
myself.
never give options. You're like,
Okay.
I know what to do. I know best. Here's the solution. Here's how you need your podcast to be built because I know best.
Yeah.
And then the answer, if you've done that process right, is all right then. And it costs this much. Okay. It's not, they don't have an issue with it. And if they do, if there's scrutiny and someone's like, well, no, I don't think, I want to think about it. It's like you haven't hooked them in at the right level. No patient goes through this process with a doctor and says, I think I'll think about it, or I'm going to shop around and see if there's someone with a different medicine. If they were to do that, it's because they don't view you as fully trustworthy, and therefore aren't deferring to your wisdom. There are, of course, occasional exceptions, but the doctor method was born then, and that's very much how I teach people. Because what we want is to, and this is again a strain of selling that for most they love, is we want to get on calls or meet people who are kind of already sold. I always say, like, you want to sell to someone who's already in love with you. And really the call is a validation that you are who they already think you are, rather than what I had to go through when I was in my early 20s, which was, go on then, I'll give you 5 minutes. Why should I listen to you? I'm like, well, this is a great start. So getting them in that right state really matters. So that was an aha moment. I was like, damn it, I hate it. I really don't like being told what to do. This is why I run my own company. I'm my own person. And this person has this doctor, all of them have this hold over me. And I'm just doing as I'm told because I've been conditioned to feel I need to defer to them. And so that understanding that positioning, the frame and dynamics is absolutely fascinating. And this is why LinkedIn I've done now 5 courses on communication nuance for them. And I'm very, very fortunate. I'm over there in a couple of 3 months' time to shoot an in-studio one in California. So it'll be like a really big course on all of these little psychological things. So I really appreciate, Kobi, you giving me a platform to nerd out over it, because you can feel from my energy I'm quite into this stuff.
No, I think that's perfect. And I've had those calls where they're saying, so what should I do? I'm like, well, there's that option A and there's option B and there's option all the way through to Z. Which one feels best for you? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, but when I've had those calls where it's clear to me and I convey it in a way that's clear to them, that's when it's been, let's do that.
Because actually the thing they're buying, I use this word a lot, it's like, it's the device. The device is the solution, but the thing they're buying really, and the science shows it's like 2/3 of the reason why, the feeling that you've got this. And like problem solved. And so that's why we need to be like, oh, I know exactly what to do with you. Genuinely saying words like that. Because the moment you make them the expert at something they're not an expert in, they're like, I don't know. And then they're looking for a point of differentiation. And if it feels kind of similar, they'll go for the cheap one. And now you just like, the thing to remember is that the right solution, the right option to give them is the one that solves the problem best. And you have to be the expert at that. Otherwise, you've got no business selling them this thing, because like they don't need you, because they must be the expert now. And it's just so important to get that right. And you will have viewers watching this going, yeah, but what about if I'm more an expert? That can't always be the case. And there's a nuance here people need to be aware of. There's always an expert. Now, if I'm buying flowers for my wife, I'm the expert because I know she's allergic to lilies, for instance.
Sure.
So I'm the expert there. What about what goes with something that's not a lily? Like what other things will go? Now they're the expert. If I go to McDonald's, I have the screen. I don't even need to interact with people. I will choose what I want to eat. When I went, bless it, it's closed now, unfortunately, but when I went to Le Gavroche and Michel Roux actually came out to the table to meet us because he was going to cook for us, you do not say to Michel Roux, do you know what, mate? Can you swap out the jus you're adding with the lamb and put like some chips in there? You are given it, and you don't even get to dictate how it's cooked. He's the expert. You are lucky to experience it. And so there's always an expert somewhere. We have to consider where that happens. I find that really interesting.
We were talking about cycling before, and I have this in many different areas of my life where I go into a shop. I'm just using cycling as an example, and not necessarily looking for a new bike, but I'll speak to someone in the shop, in a local bike shop, and ask them a question: what kind of gears does it have? and if they don't have a clue, then I'm like, you're not my guy. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not speaking to, I need to find someone who knows the thing. So at least we can have
It's like
parity.
we've experienced that same thing many times. I'm
Yeah.
literally the same. And isn't it nice though when you
Mm,
go into it's that makes the difference. You go into that shop and you've got that person you can geek. I'm the same with coffee as well. I'm a massive snob for it. And when you go into that shop, I mean, I was away with my wife recently, and she was like, "Oh no!" So this is true. I was down in Kent. There
mm.
was a coffee shop, like real premium coffee. Their own roasters as well, and the owner was into cycling. So they had these books. They had like rouleur copies of rouleur on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
wall and that. And so I'm like, this is the best thing ever. My wife was like, we're not going to leave forever, are we? So I'm talking to the guy about like what weight of water he was using and like the temperature on it and so on. And it just changes the experience so much.
Yeah.
And I went back in the 3 days we were there. I went there like 3 times, like every single day. I'm like, we'll hold off for that coffee shop. And it's just, it ruins it if you don't have that person who is that expert you can talk with. And I am, that's how humans work. And
I
it
mean,
just proves that it's not the product, it's the experience that matters and the connection with the person or the brand.
I do love this, and now I'm doing that kind of Kaiser Sose flashback in my life of where those things have happened.
Yeah.
Like when I used to buy a lot of CDs when I was a kid, the local village close to me, they had an independent independent
Yes.
store where there'd be like
Same.
50p more per CD, and then there's a Woolworths. And
Yes.
if I knew exactly what CD I wanted, I'll go to Woolworths because it's like £1 cheaper for the album.
Yeah.
But if I didn't know what I wanted, I'll go into there and speak to
Yeah.
Ken and the other guys and say, "Look, I've got a spare fiver. What should I have on?" And I'll be happy to spend more money with them, even though it's the same thing. I could literally
Yeah.
walk out the door and go to Woolworths and spend the same money, and I'd spend less money and get the same thing. But I'm like, guys, you've
Well, I remember buying a really nice watch many
Mm,
years ago, and I went to Selfridges and I went to Harrods, and I
yeah,
looked at the same watch. And I remember in Harrods, that person was massively on commission. I'm sure they both were, but I was like, wow. And she was talking about how it was the last watch in the shop, and someone had been in earlier. I was like, really? I was here right at the start of the day. And then I went to Selfridges, and that person was interested in the story behind why I wanted a watch and talked about like how it was made and that, and just locked into what I cared about. And I just find it interesting. For some things we want the experience, for other things we don't. I was exactly the same. I used
mm,
to go to in Ian's music and video. It was, and I would like talk to this guy. I'm like, what's hot right now? What's just come out? What have you got? Like, what's out back that you haven't put out yet? That
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. And if it matters to you, it really matters to you. You know what I mean?
Second aha moment question: what light bulb moments, aha moments have you had in products that you love that you use, or either regularly or not?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. What aha moment have I had in a product that I use?
Yeah,
Okay. I think I think an aha moment around, so coffee is a really interesting one.
sure.
Um with coffee, an aha moment was many years ago when I was like, I realized that it was the ritual that
Yes.
I was and I think it was Seth Godin who said the actual product is the souvenir from the experience. You know, it's like, well, I have to have something to come away from.
Mm,
And so people who don't get it, they're like, what's wrong with you? Just make your coffee. And I'm like, it's not about the coffee, it's about part of this ritual in the morning. And taking half an hour to meticulously weigh out 18 grams of whole beans that I know have come from a really been sourced in the right way in that and been washed in a certain way, that matters to me because that's art that I love, and it sets me up for the day in the right way. And I think when I realized that whilst the coffee tasted great, it tasted great because I was telling myself it was tasting great. And I remember, so the aha moment was when I tested the theory with a bottle of wine
mm,
with the cleaner. I have a different one now, but the cleaner I had at the time for my house, at the end of the, this sounds really mean actually, but basically we gave her an average bottle of wine, like a bottle of red wine, to say thank you at the end of the year. And I remember thinking to myself, it's all about like the narrative and the experience. And so we said, like, this is a really nice bottle of wine, and we just wanted to do something special for you. And it wasn't like it wasn't like Lambrini, but it wasn't like world class, wasn't great, hadn't got an award or anything.
mhm.
And I remember, because she didn't care, I remember she was like, that's so nice. And when she came back, that like after Christmas or whatever it was, she was like, that wine was amazing. It's one of the best bottles of wine ever. I was like, but it's not though. And it just goes to show that if you create the right experience, I mean, the extreme of it though, it's like if you look at Apple with
Yeah.
the Apple cloth that was $18 for a piece of cloth, and it's like, if you want to see an example of people buying into a narrative, I think they had a monitor stand, not a
Yes.
monitor, their stand
There's
is
a
at
monitor.
$700 or something like that. And it's like good for them because like the lining up like cattle to be taken all their money from. But I just think it's really interesting that I just remember thinking what I'm really sold on here is like this wonderful background kind of story that I'm taking myself through each day. And like, this is the way I want to live. But could argue it's just a cup of coffee. And the difference between that cup of coffee and one where I didn't put in that kind of effort, negligible. I
Yeah.
probably couldn't tell the difference, if you lined up two cups.
I think this is that ritual, and I sometimes call it the ceremony,
Yes.
is super important when, like, a lot of my friends now, and I do a lot less. I drink less alcohol now,
Yes, same.
and it's made way easier because of the non-alcoholic beers that are
Yes.
available.
Which
And
are actually good now. That's the
yeah,
thing. It
and
used
that's
to be
and
rough.
well, A, they're good, but B, it's that Friday after a long week or whatever. It's that
Mm.
getting something cold from out of the fridge, that
Yeah.
sound. It's the
Yeah.
point, and that's the same, and that gets you. We talked about Pareto principle, but for me, I
Yeah.
think it's like it gets me 95% of the way there, and
Yeah.
that ritual I think is
It's a weird thing because it sets you up for the day. Like, so in the mornings I have, before the coffee, it's like there's yoga, there's breath work, there's like an ice bath. Like I did the whole Wim Hof thing a
oh
while
wow, yeah,
back,
yeah.
so I've done on these retreats and things. And so like, when you have that kind of ritual, it does impact the whole of that day. And it's like there's that thing of like if you make your bed and like start in the right way, it does make you feel that much more noble, and everything kind of comes together. And those days where you drop the ball and don't bother, it's like this cascade of clunkiness through the day, and you're like, it's 11 o'clock, I've given up on life, I'm just got this apathy, and so I'm just going to watch YouTube instead. So maintaining the ritual has practical benefits without question.
Final aha moment question is: are there any moments, personal aha moments you have, where you think, yeah, I'm glad I started doing that. I'm glad I found this thing it's really helped me. Like maybe it's a ritual side of things.
Yeah, there's been some really profound moments. When I was 32, so 2012,
Hmm.
My daughter was born without an esophagus.
Oh
So
wow.
she had like no food pipe at all. It kind of was a pouch at the back of her throat, didn't join up with her stomach. So literally born and straight to surgery up in Cambridge. So I didn't hold her for 2 weeks because she was in an induced coma, so she
Mm.
wouldn't move around. She was a month premature. Harrowing. Like the whole of that year was like more operations, more operations. And 3 months after she was born, so I was going through that. My mum died from cancer after 2 years of like dealing with that as well.
Hmm.
And like, if ever there was a watershed moment, it wasn't a moment though. It was like a very harrowing year. Into 2013, I remember going through hell. You can imagine how dark it was for me. But at the same time, I remember it was October 2013, and I was away with my wife and my daughter then, and she was kind of on the mend. And I remember like I'd had this massive implosion, and I'd been signed off work, and I was in a very bad place, like not wanting to be around, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking like, is this it? Like, is this it for the rest of my life? Like working like a dog in the city. Like, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter money and tailored suits and that, because I'm working like sometimes 80-hour weeks was killing me. And it was like, there must be a something. And I remember thinking like, perhaps designing a life you want to have is possible. And it actually took, I'm very fortunate, a wife nudging me and saying, you've got this,
Yeah.
when I really didn't believe I've got anything. I couldn't decide what to have for dinner, let alone what route to take. And she's like, you've got this, come on. And I was like, come on, then, let's give myself something to get my teeth into. And I'm so happy that it's so weird because obviously it's a horrible set of circumstances. And if I could never go through that, then of course I would opt for that. But perversely, it was because I think I've made it happen
Hmm.
since then. I think it was a true gift. It's easy to say it was a gift, but it's a real gift to have had to go through that. it didn't half make me grow up, but I'm
Yeah.
really pleased that I chose that route rather than the just push through route, because goodness knows where I would be now. And I think that it's something for all of us to really continually take stock on, like, where are we? Are we genuinely happy? And you've got to remember, like, there's no path in life ever where you're in like level of delusion in how happy you are. You won't be deliriously happy always. It's going to be hard slog, whatever, because that's what being a grown up is. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got a child now. You know exactly what I mean. But, like, there's curveballs everywhere. But
Yeah.
the fact is, like, if you can choose the path that is going to be like, this is probably more fulfilling for me, then you should be doing it. And I think the aha moment to pin it down is more that I chose a narrative of my own rather than an external one, which was the echoes of my upbringing. And what I mean by that is success looks like you went to a good university, you now got a job in London wearing a suit and wife and kids in the house, and you're making some money. That's how you feel, but the optics externally look like success. And I had to choose to not do that, because that was like, well, everyone seems to feel like I'm doing nicely, but inside I'm like really not happy with it. So choosing a path where it was my narrative rather than an external one is my roundabout way of saying I think that's the aha moment that made it.
I think that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Before I go, I said I got a few Easter eggs for you. I'm wearing my top from university. I heard that you did taekwondo back in the day, and this still fits me. I still wear it a lot and still feel proud of it.
I wear my Warwick t-shirt as well, my Warwick hoodie as well, from like, gosh, 23 years or whatever it was, 22 years ago.
And yeah, still love it. And when did you stop?
I stopped in 2018, actually. I was like, something has to give. I got too much on, and I got to 4th Dan black belt.
Oh, wow.
I saw my instructor this week, actually, Mr. Silva, who is now a 7th Dan master. And my 20s was, aside from work and pushing myself and growing, it was taekwondo. And I would train in the mornings before work. I'd stay at his house in the evenings and train again the next day. And I medaled at national and European level, and it was an amazing thing. But one of the best parts of it wasn't just like the discipline it gives you and the focus and things like that. What I loved was then becoming an instructor and running my own academies and taking people from white belt to black belt as well. That was like I felt like I was giving back.
Absolutely.
When I got my stripes, my 4th Dan, it meant so much to me. And just there's literal sweat and tears and definitely blood goes into it, as you know. But yeah, an amazing chapter, but like, you can't do everything. And I'm an endurance guy now, so running and cycling is my thing.
Yeah, I stopped at 1st Dan, and then I started doing capoeira.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, and loved that. And that was my thing, traveling around the world doing capoeira, and became an instructor. I didn't start my own club group though, but
I love the story of that and like how it all came about, and how they're hiding the martial art in the form of dancing is kind of amazing.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, I'm going to definitely keep on talking to you, guys. If you're listening, I'll maybe give you updates about whether we start taekwondo again or spar.
Yes.
But one of the reasons I love the Olympics is because we get to see all these sports, and I always make sure I have time for the taekwondo when it's
although it's a different. I did ITF rather than
I did
WTF.
I did the Olympic one, so we would never have sparred. We would never.
No, we wouldn't have sparred, unfortunately. No. Yeah, you got the famous one everyone knows about. I got the other one.
But there's a third one. It's a TAGB, which like
TAGB. That's right. Yeah, yeah. We have to be politically careful with what we say about. Like, they're all wonderful, but sometimes you look at you're like, really, it's like a completely different martial art. But then of course they go in their own direction. But yeah,
absolutely.
It all started in 1955, and like it all starts at the same start point.
Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I
Thank you.
Carry on for longer. Normally these like 40 odd minutes, but this has been longer, and I've learned a lot. Selfishly, this is why. Hopefully you guys listening and watching can learn from Richard, and people free to become follower 100,001.
Yeah, well, get me over the line. Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining Richard and I on this episode today. It's been a blast. It was a blast speaking to Richard, and we are still in touch. As I said, it's been a few months now since I recorded. I hope you got out of it a lot, because I did. And I'm in the enviable position of being the one asking the questions, but hopefully they percolate down and you can get a lot from it as well. as I said in the intro, if you want to get in touch with Richard, you can do. All of his LinkedIn links are in the bottom, in the show notes, and also in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And if you want to join the Art of Sale community, please do, and I will see you there. But thanks again for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, save, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you are listening on your favorite podcast app. It really, really helps. And leave us a review. It's great. It really helps us, really helps other people to find this podcast and this episode in particular. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you on the next one.